I always tell folks, if you can do a video version or an interview or you on camera, I think, your face on camera is your most powerful marketing asset as well as your voice. But, the more you can give them you, especially in this world of avatars and bots, the better off you're going to be.
Podcast Junkies, episode 369. Welcome back. I'm your host, Harry Duran. If you are new to the show, it's the one where we search out interesting voices in podcasting, get them to kick back their heels and talk about their shows or whatever else is on their mind or in their hearts, what's coming alive for them. If you are a regular listener and viewer, thank you for everything you do to support the show. Whether you're promoting this or mentioning this as a guest or you're doing it as a listener, everything you do is thoroughly appreciated. So please keep on doing it and keep spreading the word about the show. In case you missed last episode, we had a great conversation with Rocio Perez. She's the Chief Leadership Officer at Virtuous, and she shared her inspiring journey of transformation from being a teenage mother with a sixth grade education to becoming a successful entrepreneur and leadership coach. We discussed her experience with a brain tumor diagnosis at 34, which led her to San Diego to find herself and confront unacknowledged trauma. Her story is a true testament to the power of intuition, perseverance, and self-belief. So please check that out if you haven't done so already. This week, I'm thrilled to welcome someone who's been in my podcasting space and sphere for a long time, Lou Bortone. We keep running into the same circles and we just never had time to connect, so I wanted to invite him on and see what's happening in his world. He's a video marketing expert and a podcast producer, and he shares his journey from working in radio and TV to running his own video production agency. We talk about the evolution of video editing tech from expensive equipment to user-friendly tools like AI and Descript, which we're a big fan of. Lou offers insights on creating engaging content for platforms like YouTube and LinkedIn, and also emphasizing the importance of adapting to different formats and audience preferences. Throughout the conversation, he provides practical tips for podcasters looking to expand into video content. We speak about the challenge of remote work, the power of AI and content creation, and the changing landscape of media consumption, which is really affecting any podcast producer at this moment in time. Lou's experiences from his early days in broadcasting to his current work with legacy branding offers valuable perspectives for content creators navigating this digital age. His approach to balancing tech with authentic storytelling really resonated with me, and it reminded me of the importance of having a human element in our increasingly digital world. It's getting weird. To tell things apart now with these AI tools, it's pretty freaky. And I don't know what's going to happen in the future. I think Rogan talked about living in a simulation where we're not going to be able to tell reality from what's fake. And it's a strange time, but we're looking to embrace it in the best way we can and make sure we increase the number of heartfelt and human-to-human connections like this episode. Here are 5 takeaways from this episode I want you to listen out for. 1, leverage video for podcasts. That goes as a no-brainer. We're doing it here. Record video versions of your podcast interviews whenever possible. Your face on camera is a powerful marketing asset, especially in the world of avatars and bots, which we're seeing so many of now. 2, utilize AI tools we mentioned, like Pictory, Luma, Suno, Descript, to generate B-roll footage, create custom music, and enhance podcast production efficiency. 3, optimize your content for multiple platforms. Create different versions of content for various platforms. For example, you can take a square graphic for LinkedIn. You can take clips for your podcast episode, the vertical style clips, and post those on YouTube Shorts, Instagram Reels, TikTok. There's a lot of ways to repurpose that content. 4, embrace new tech. It just goes without saying, there's so much happening so fast. It's kind of making my head spin. But if you're in this world, a lot of it can help you streamline your production and help you stay on top, especially if you're a solo producer. 5, balance online and offline presences. So this is a bit different than the tech-related conversation. It's more about this idea of being an introvert in a digital world. I consider myself selectively introvert is, I think, the phrase that I've used, and we talk about this on the conversation. It's really important, and we talk about how we handle that, and which I thought was a nice way to wrap up the conversation. If you're enjoying it and you love it, please leave a rating and a review at podcastjunkies.com/love. Nothing would please me more than to read it out on a future episode. Make sure, if you're watching this, to click that subscribe button below so you'll be notified when new episodes go live. And as always, you can always visit podcastjunkies.com to read the full show notes for each episode. We've got a lot of great content there, transcriptions, key takeaways, memorable quotes, and any guest resources mentioned as well. Okay, enjoy this conversation with Lou. So Lou Bortone, host of Oh Shit, I'm Dead, and various other projects I'm sure we'll get into. Thank you so much for joining me on Podcast Junkies.
Thanks, Harry. It's good to see you.
Yeah, good to see Can you recall the first time we ever got connected? We were just chatting about that.
It's one of those, I think a friend of a friend, maybe Liz Scully, maybe Matthew Kimberly,
Matthew
but
Kimberly comes to
it's
mind. Yeah, for
great
sure.
because, it's sort of these folks sort of coming in and out of our lives at different
Yeah.
times, which I think is awesome. And I saw you recently at Podfest.
Yes. What's the first podcast conference you attended?
God, honestly,
Yeah.
Podfest.
Podfest. Okay, yeah, that's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
And then have you been to all the others at this point?
No, honestly, because to be honest, I was going to podcast things and doing all that because I was a podcast producer and editor. I
Yeah,
was,
yeah.
as you are, and I was editing clients' podcasts. And I thought, if I'm doing all these podcasts and I know how to do it and I do it quickly, I should really do my own. So I started with a passion project that was called Take the Cannoli, the Godfather podcast.
Yeah.
I got through what I call a season or 12 episodes of that. And then I was exhausted because they were taking like 3 or 4 days each.
Yeah.
And then this past January, when I knew I was going to Podfest again, and speaking of Podfest, I'm like, I can't go to Podfest without a podcast. So I started it really quickly. And I'd been doing a lot about legacy branding. So I decided to do a
Mm,
podcast called Oh Shit, I'm Dead, the Legacy Podcast.
that's funny. And how many episodes have you recorded of that one?
I think I'm up to 14. So just
Okay.
pretty much every week since January.
Is that interview based?
Yes, they're
Okay.
interviews. So I've been, going back to friends and colleagues and trying to get them to talk about how they want to be remembered when they're gone.
Mm,
We keep it kind of light. We say, what do you want your walk-off song to be at your memorial service and things
yeah.
like that. So it's been fun just to really, as a way to just reconnect more deeply with folks, a lot of our mutual friends and things like that. So it's been fun.
So when you think of a concept like that, obviously people probably think more about that as they get older.
Mhm.
We're not thinking about that when we're in our 20s, 30s, even
Yeah.
40s. But
Yeah.
what was happening in your life that kind of brought that front of mind for you again?
Wow. Well, I'd been doing some stuff on ancestry.com.
Okay.
I go to Italy pretty much every year, and I finally decided, I'm going to Italy and I'm on vacation doing this and that. I have to go back to where my grandparents were born in southern Italy.
Mm,
And just thinking about the legacy and the ancestry and stuff like that, I thought, it'd be kind of fun to talk about how people want to be remembered while they're still here, because you
yeah.
obviously
Yeah.
can't ask them afterwards.
Yeah.
And it's gone all over the place. It's been everything from I've had past life regressionists on,
Oh, wow.
and people telling me, "Oh yeah, you were big in the Roman Empire." I'm like, okay, maybe, but
Yeah.
no,
Hard to
it's
prove
gone in
that.
a lot of fun directions. And oftentimes we get, like I get people saying, "I've never told anyone this before, but," which I
Yes.
love
Yeah.
because that
And
means
so
we're
how,
getting.
when you think about the people that you bring on, do you
Mhm.
have a structure for questions you ask, or are you sometimes surprised by like what people are talking about?
I don't. I kind of let it go, and then sometimes it's a surprise, and sometimes those are the best clips.
Yeah.
Sort of like somebody went to someplace they'd never been before, or they told me that something they'd never told anyone else before.
Yeah.
So it's fun, and it gets people to think. I've also had folks who've had sort of, near death experiences and things like that. And I say, is there anything you'd do differently now that you've survived 3 bouts of cancer? And they're like, no, not really. And sometimes it's totally different. So they're full of surprises.
Yeah. And when you started the first show on The Godfather, like, yeah, was it the first podcast you had done your own?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. And what made you want to pick? Obviously, you've got the Italian heritage. Is
Yeah.
that the
I've
primary
been
reason?
Yeah, I've been kind of obsessed with The Godfather and at the time it was the 50th anniversary. Oh my God, I feel old. And there were a lot of things happening around The Godfather. Paramount did a show called The Offer, which is about the making of The Godfather.
Yeah.
And, it was pretty accurate, but I was seeing a lot of like, oh no, that didn't happen. This didn't happen. So I was
Yeah.
going in and finding old interviews and,
Oh, wow.
things like people who had auditioned, like Martin Sheen had auditioned for Michael. So I'd
Mm,
find all this stuff and then basically build an episode. But I was using, clips and B-roll and interviews, and
okay.
they were taking like, 2 or 3 days because
Yeah.
I almost thought like, all right, this is only a 12-minute podcast, but it's taken like 20 hours to produce.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I much prefer the interview format that I'm doing now because it's kind of like show up and talk. So
I know.
I suppose there's research and things, but it's a little less heavy lifting than the little mini documentaries were.
Yeah, I mean, hats off to folks that do that sort of content because it's like like you said, it's just you're just outlining how much work it takes. And I think
Right.
I started this show in 2014, and then it's been basically driven by the guests that come on the show. I think
Hmm.
maybe in the 11 years I've been doing the show, I maybe did two or three that have been solo,
Hmm.
just bonus episodes. But it's nice to have the guests provide the content
Yeah.
for you, and we don't do a lot of heavy lifting on the edits as well, because I
Hmm.
think thankfully with shows like Joe Rogan, people are used to now just 3 hour conversations, and
Hmm.
people know when to pause a show. And I think in the past people would be worried about like my show's too long or I'm providing too much. And I
Yeah.
think like podcast listeners have matured in terms of like
Hmm.
understanding how to consume shows and how to use podcast apps. So I think, whatever the show is, I think people will find a place to listen to it, whether
Hmm.
it's walking the dog or making dinner. And
Yeah.
so you don't have to worry about that too much.
Right. The other reason I initially started my podcast because I was, obviously doing video. I do video for folks and video marketing.
Yeah.
And I'd seen the statistic, and this was a little while back, that YouTube was really, becoming a pretty major player in terms of
Yeah.
podcasts. So I was
Yeah.
taking my clients' audio only podcasts and turning them into video, either with B-roll or whatever, and just going
Mm-hmm.
into Descript. Like between having Descript, which changed the way I edit, and
Yeah.
YouTube, which gave us a new audience, I said, "This is it. This is got to do it."
Yeah, for sure. So let's rewind the clock back a little bit. How did you get started in video production?
I grew up in the TV industry. My dad worked at the NBC affiliate in Boston, and I
Okay.
spent many weekend there. So I knew when I went to college that all I wanted to do was be involved in TV. I didn't
Yeah.
want to be on camera.
Okay.
I kind of got into the marketing and promotion side of things and branding. So I was never on camera. I was never doing production. I was always on the marketing side. So I worked in radio, in TV,
Okay.
and cable in Los Angeles, and then eventually came back to the Boston area about 20-ish years ago. And I've been doing my own stuff ever since.
What was your time in radio like?
It was fun because in radio promotion, you do a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
So you really get a sense of how broadcasting works and how the station works. And when I say you do a little bit of everything as the promotion manager, that also means that if the sponsor of a parade doesn't show up, who happened to be Daily Pickles, then guess who wears the pickle outfit in the parade?
That's funny.
So I think that was either my highest point or my lowest point in radio was marching in the pickle parade. And unfortunately it was, it was very top heavy, the
Yeah.
pickle, Captain Pickle. And I was walking behind, a car. So I'm breathing this exhaust the whole time. By the
Oh
end of the
gosh.
parade, the pickle was going like, so radio's a great training ground because, you learn to do a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Mhm.
What were the different roles you had there?
In radio, I was doing promotion and marketing, which is almost like an arm of sales. So I
Yeah.
go on sales calls, and basically the salespeople promise something ridiculous, and then it's up to me as the promotion department to deliver it.
That's
So
funny.
yeah, we did a lot of fun stuff. And then when I went to Los Angeles, I moved into TV at Entertainment Television.
Oh yeah.
And sometimes the transition from radio to TV can be hard, but my boss had worked at a radio station,
Okay.
the guy who hired me. So he knew,
Yeah.
he's like, this guy can do anything.
Okay.
So yeah. And that's when I got more into the video and making behind the scenes footage. And back in the day, when we edited on Avid, you needed an editing suite and three
Yeah.
people. And now it's kind of like, oh, I can do this in 2 minutes. So
Yeah. 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 So what was the biggest change for you when you moved from radio to TV?
I think it was honestly more about moving from Boston to Los Angeles because
Oh
I
yeah.
was sort of just this goofy kid with an accent.
Yeah.
And it's like one of those movies. My boss was like a real LA guy, pulled me in. He's like, here's $1,000, go to this store, get 3 suits and get a haircut, and don't wear those shoes anymore.
That's hilarious.
So it was almost more of a cultural shift. But really, the transition from radio to TV from a business standpoint was really easy because I was
Yeah.
doing a lot of the things. And then it's like, okay, just add pictures. So
Okay.
yeah,
So what were your editing projects early on the video side?
we did something that I think we were one of the first companies to do this. When I was at E, we did pre-theater commercials and interviews. Now it's like, 20 minutes of crap before the movies. But back in the
Yeah. Yeah.
day, we'd just go and say, okay, there's a movie coming out with Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger. So we go interview them, which is really exciting.
Yeah.
And then we'd, edit the interviews together, and that would become sort of a 2-minute package that they'd play before
Mm,
the movie started. And that, nowadays, like obviously, I don't go to the movies that often, but I know
yeah.
that there's like 25 minutes of
I
crap
know.
before the movies. Like,
Yeah.
just show the movie.
Do you have any good stories from interviewing someone that sort of caught you off guard?
Yes. And again, and it goes back to The Godfather. There was a movie, and this is going way back, I'm showing my age here, called Honeymoon in Vegas
Oh
with
yeah.
Nicolas Cage and
Yeah, it was a
James
great
Caan.
movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I had to interview, not me personally, but I had to help with the production of the interview
Yeah.
of James Caan, and I had to write what they were going to say, which is really like, oh my God, I'm writing for Sonny on The Godfather. So he's like, James Caan's like, what is this crap? I'm not reading this. And so they bring it back to me. They're like, he doesn't like it. Can you rewrite it? And I changed like two things. And then I just said, tell him that, just read the damn thing. So he did. And they're like, oh my God, I just stood up to Sonny Corleone, so really fun, good guys, but
Yeah.
they're just there to sort of promote their movie and do their
Yeah.
thing. We had a few other things. I remember we interviewed William Shatner once
Oh
because
yeah.
he was on the Naked Gun thing.
Yeah.
And some
Yeah.
of them were a little bit more ego than others, but oftentimes it's just like, oh my God, I've got to do like 15 of these things. Let's just get
Of
it done.
of course.
So,
Yeah, they're in that mode, and it's probably like the artists that make the rounds on the radio stations, and they just got to
right.
show up and keep repeating. They just
Yep.
repeating the same, like you said, 15, 20 times, and they're
Yeah.
just
Yep.
in like rote mode.
hmm So you'd have to watch the movie before it came out or read the script and say, okay, what can we ask them? What can we pull this? What can we pull
Yeah.
that? It's like, oh man, if I had ChatGPT back then, I would have been a monster. But
So when did you start moving into doing your own production work?
when I was living in Los Angeles, I was working at a company called Fox Family Worldwide. We own
Okay.
Fox Kids and the Family Network,
Yeah.
Family Channel, things like that. And my division was being sold to Disney, and that just seemed like good timing. Like, I don't know if I want to work for Disney. I had twins who were 2 years old, and we said, let's go back east. Let's go back home to where the family is in Boston area. And when I came back, honestly, I sort of had a certain amount of hubris. Like, I'm from Los Angeles. I can get whatever job I want in Boston.
Yeah.
And as it turns out, I ended up being a promotion manager at a radio station. And I'm like, wait a minute, this is what I was doing 20
Back
years
to
ago.
radio.
So after that, I kind of helped the radio station get back on track. And I said, I'll give you a year. And after that, I just said, I don't want to do the same thing I was doing 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So I just started doing with nonprofits, like shooting and editing video. And then I really got back into marketing, which is what I was doing anyway. So
Mm.
I don't even, shoot any video now. I do some editing and some things like that, but it's really more about the strategy, and podcasting is sort of obviously one marketing vehicle that a lot of my clients use.
So in the early days when you started the agency, what type of projects were you working on?
A couple of nonprofits,
Yeah.
which was very rewarding just because, we're just helping people that were in that community. I live in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. So
Okay.
one was against sexual violence. Another one was for a college in the area. So those were kind of interesting because, they had really tight budgets and we had to be really efficient and try to
Yeah.
just kind of focus on what we needed to do. And the other thing that was changing at the time is, my partner, who was the videographer, had a $15,000 camera. And this was about the time that the flip camera and iPhones started to come out.
Yeah.
And we all just, got rid of all the expensive equipment and started to shoot on flip cameras and
Yeah.
iPhones like that.
Yeah. And what is it about shooting for not-for-profits? Because you're working with, sometimes nowadays you think about podcasts, a lot of it is
Mhm.
entertainment.
Yep.
A lot of it is like not exactly like the deepest conversations, but it's important to the creator and it's
Mhm.
helpful. But was there something about working with not-for-profits where you're dealing with people who are going through it,
Mhm.
life-wise, and there's really
Yep.
like tough topics to cover? I wonder if that's some
Yeah,
of
some of
the
it
challenges you
was.
had. Yeah.
And sometimes if folks were a little antsy about being off camera, one of the things we'd do is on the old cameras, there was a red light called a tally light, which meant the camera was on, and
Yeah.
we'd just shut off. You can manually shut off the tally light. And let's say, let's just have a conversation before we start the cameras and blah, blah, blah. But the cameras are rolling the whole time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And oftentimes, if they didn't know the camera was on, the conversation would be a lot more comfortable
Yeah.
or engaging than if they're like, oh my God, deer in the headlights.
Yeah. Yeah, it's always the same. And
hmm
it's funny how sometimes you get good clips from guests, even on a podcast interview, when you've quote unquote, like you've turned the record button off or something like that.
Yeah. Yep.
And sometimes I used to get into the habit of just letting things keep recording because sometimes you never know when you'd get a good
hmm
soundbite.
Yeah. So we'd do a lot of interviews and things like that. And it was oftentimes, and this is less the case now, but the more you shoot and the more footage you have, the better the end product's going to be, because then you have more to
Yeah.
work from and more to edit from. And nowadays it's kind of like, if I can't get this right in 2 takes, I'm not doing it.
Mm. Where did you hone your craft in terms of like video? Like who did you learn from, or is there like a
Mhm.
mentor that helped you along the way?
I mean, a lot of marketing mentors
Mm,
once I moved online, but back in the day, it was really more just following the producers who had been there for a while and kind of knew
yeah.
what they were doing. And honestly, there's just sitting in the room, sitting in the edit bay, or sitting in
Mm,
the interview and keeping your mouth shut
yeah.
was, amazing. So just like the more you listen, and that's the other thing, you have to come in with sort of a beginner's mind and say, there's a lot I don't know. So I'm just going to shut up and listen until I figure it out.
Yeah, it's so interesting, like the power of a good edit, because I'm a big movie buff, and
Hmm.
and a lot of times you've got the person directing it and camera videographer, which gives
Hmm.
you like the visual representation of the movie, but a lot of it comes down to like editing,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
and obviously a lot of the bigger name directors will be sitting in the editing booth as it's happening,
Yep.
but is that kind of where you cut your teeth and kind of learned how you could give two people the same footage and you could end up with completely different products?
Yeah, absolutely. And, when I was back in LA, I went to the Motion Picture Museum because they had a Godfather exhibit. And you could see the editing machine that they actually edited on that was in
Yeah,
this big glass case. And it
yeah,
was huge. And I'm like, oh my God, how do they even,
yeah,
deal with this physical tape? But yeah, I mean, it's just, and part of it's just, obsessing about Marty Scorsese films and watching them 20 times and
yeah,
seeing a certain scene in Goodfellas. And I'm like, oh, I see what he's doing with the camera in there. The
yeah.
foreground is the same, but the background is moving in to make it feel like the world's closing in on you. So all these
Yeah,
little,
yeah,
sort of directing techniques that you pick up after a while.
yeah. It's interesting. You watch that with a closer eye. I don't know if you've recently seen this new show on Netflix called Adolescence.
No, but I've heard a lot about it. I gotta definitely check it out.
It's only 4 episodes, and they're very emotional, incredibly well acted. But
Hmm.
every episode is a single camera shot,
Oh my gosh.
and it's 45 minutes to an hour, and
Yeah.
it's like really. I mean, it's not in the beginning like you think is this just gonna be a gimmick, because I've
Hmm.
seen it done before, but they've paired it with like a really good script, incredible actors,
Wow.
really good acting. So
Hmm.
it's probably a reason why there's so much buzz around it. But yeah, it's well worth the watch
Yeah.
as well.
That's
Uh,
wild. I mean,
yeah,
I just learned various things like the tracking shot, like in Goodfellas when they're following Ray Liotta,
yeah, yeah. That's a
going
great
backwards
one.
with it to the Copa Club and all the halls. And then the other night I saw, I think it was Family Guy of all things. Like they did the scene
Oh,
shot for
really?
shot when Peter was walking through the so
That's
yeah, I
funny.
just love stuff. It's almost like being on a joke that people don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah. It used to be like a one-off thing. I think Birdman was a single shot, single camera
Wow.
shot,
Hmm.
and the new Seth Rogen show on Apple TV.
Oh, right.
It's
Studio?
about the studio. Yeah, yeah. There's several single camera shots in there. So,
Yeah.
and that's a send up of the industry. Martin Scorsese makes a cameo in there, so you should watch that if you're a Scorsese fan.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So, as you started working with clients, and you mentioned the technology evolving
Mhm.
from like Avid desks required for
Yep.
editing to where we're at now, because we use Descript as well. What were some of the changes you had to incorporate into your own agency? Was it just requests from clients, or just you
Mhm.
just realized that this was a much smarter workflow?
It was, yeah, it just was so I'd been editing on Final Cut Pro for 20 plus years.
Yeah, yeah,
And when I was seeing some of the stuff I could do with the script, I almost felt guilty, like, "Oh my gosh, how can I charge for this much for a podcast when it used to take an hour, now it takes 15 minutes." So,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
um, but it's great because then you can do, more and better content. You can slow down and really think about the message and the messaging and, because
Hmm.
initially, I'm really a marketing guy at heart that just happens to know how to edit. So
Yeah.
so it always comes back to that, really the marketing and the messaging.
And so I think you do some training as well for Descript now on your
Mhm.
site. Yeah,
Yeah.
because it's interesting because when I got into video, I dabbled a couple times in iMovie, and that is like not intuitive at
Yeah.
all. And I didn't want to get into like the bigger programs like Final Cut. I come
Mhm.
from like more on the audio side, so I was using
Yep.
Ableton that did some electronic music production, so I was familiar with
Mhm.
that. And now I use Hindenburg for the audio side.
Oh,
But
cool.
so I was the founding advisor to Squadcast. Rock and Zach, I met them at Podcast Movement in 2016, and
Mhm.
I saw a lot of promise, and I said, we just got to get the word out. And so they brought me
That's
on as
amazing.
founding advisor. And then obviously they had a nice acquisition. Descript bought them as
Right.
well. So that's
Mhm.
when I started to become more familiar. And I had been using Descript in the past.
Yep.
And I think when they came on the scene, I actually interviewed, I'm not sure about the timing, but I think
Mhm.
what happened is that I interviewed Andrew Mason on the show on Podcast Junkies, the
Wow.
founder of Descript.
Yep.
because his PR team had reached out,
Hmm.
as they are when they've got new launches.
Yeah.
And I was like, wait, that's the former CEO of Groupon. Like
Oh
that's
my,
Andrew Mason. I was like, oh, I know that name.
that's
And he
funny.
came on the show. So we came on Podcast Junkies and we talked because it was a new tool for podcasters and it
Yeah.
was nice. And then like 6 months or a month later, they acquired Lyrebird, I think, which was like the dubbing tool,
Hmm. Yep.
which is now very common nowadays.
Yep.
And I was like, oh, you want to come back on? And then I was able to do that interview with Squadcast.
Oh, cool. It's
So
like a
we had,
full circle moment.
so then I introduced him to the team and then they stayed in contact. And so that ended up
Mm.
great for them. But that's how I started to become more and more familiar. And they haven't really slowed down because
No, it's
when you think
great.
about like just even the studio sound
Hmm.
upgrades on audio, it's
Yep.
been a game changer because they've improved that as well. Handling multi-camera shots,
Yeah.
and just really sequencing them out. And
Hmm.
then the clips creation tool is pretty
Yeah.
pretty wild. And the
Hmm.
eye correction tool if you're doing solo videos. So, there's so much to learn because they keep adding new features.
Hmm.
But now I feel so comfortable like editing video nowadays,
Right.
because without having had any exposure to any of the earlier tools, but it's just very intuitive and user friendly.
Yeah. And I like teaching it because my whole thing is, empowering people to get their message out.
Yeah.
Obviously, I think the best video and
Yeah.
podcasting are the best ways to do that. And the script just levels the playing field, and people who wouldn't ever think of touching Final Cut Pro are like, oh, okay, I get it. I can just edit this
Yeah.
Word document. And they also realize that, I've salvaged some not so great interviews and
Oh
videos
yeah.
script because of taking out the ums and ahs and
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think you just have to be careful with the automated tools. I coach, I let my students know who are moving into script and the ones that
Hmm.
want to do it themselves because you make that mistake in the beginning and you say, filter out all the ums and ahs, and it goes through the entire video in a couple of, a minute and just it'll remove them all, but it'll sound very robotic
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it takes out your breaths as well. And people don't, when they first get into editing, they just see a space and they figure, cut it, cut it, cut it.
Yeah.
And people, when you play it back, you realize, oh, people need to breathe in
I,
between in between words and in between thoughts and their thinking, and sometimes it can
yeah.
affect a lot, like spacing. And I'm sure,
I know you
you
really
know,
have to go. When I edit the podcast, I go through the whole thing and don't just do a blanket edit because, like for instance, as a video person, I talk about know, like, and trust a lot.
yep,
Takes out all
same,
the likes, and
same.
now it's just like no blank trust. Like no, I
Yeah,
wanted that.
yeah, that's a good way to put it. And so as you started to work more, what type of kind of demographic is it for people that are looking to do their own video? Like,
Mhm.
is it podcasters a lot, or are you seeing people from
It is
other areas?
podcasters, but really anyone that's in, especially the digital space, online marketing.
Hmm.
I have everything from horse rescue to real estate to financial planner. Which is neat because it's kind of across the board. And a lot of those folks now realize, like, this, I don't have to own a TV network or a radio
Yeah,
station to be able to get my message out and do pretty much
yeah.
whatever they're doing.
So a lot of the noise nowadays in podcasting is what's happening with YouTube, right?
Hmm.
Ever since they've made their big splash and they've set up
Yep.
the podcast as its own playlist, and that's their signal to anyone who's on YouTube that if you want to
Right.
search for a podcast, this is what we're going to serve you up. But it's a
Hmm.
mixed bag because obviously there's content in there, and I know James Cridland at Pod News does a great job of reporting on this, but not everything that falls in that category is actually podcasts. So
Right.
people have to be a bit discerning. So how are you thinking about content nowadays, especially in the podcasting space,
Hmm.
as it relates to YouTube? Because it's its own beast. I mean,
Yeah.
you've got keywords, you've got, YouTube shorts, you've
Hmm.
got descriptions. And how do you think about content now that people are thinking about that are coming from the audio space?
Right.
They have to sort of rethink their strategy now for video.
Yeah. I mean, and I tell folks, it's like, if you're doing an interview podcast, why not record it on Squadcast or Zoom or wherever, just so that
Yeah.
you've got a visual. And folks that don't have the visuals, I try to, I mean, the sort of default is like, okay, we'll put up a thumbnail and we'll put the,
Yeah. Waveform. Yeah.
waveforms
Yeah. Yeah.
and maybe captions, and that's okay. But I mean, if we have the time and resources, I'd rather go in and find B-roll and just
Hmm.
find something, some pattern interrupts so that
Yeah.
they're not just watching a thumbnail. Although, I mean, I would still say that having that is better than not having
Yeah.
anything at all, because if you're now going to YouTube and before you only go into Spotify and iTunes or whatever, you've got a huge new audience. And if there's,
Yeah.
if the stats, if you believe the stats, they say YouTube is now the number one place to discover podcasts. So
Mm. Yeah, I think they did a little fudging of the numbers there because I was reading some of the articles on there and
yeah,
they kind of like expand their definition of
yeah. I
what a
mean, like
podcast is.
what's podcast, right? But
Yeah,
oftentimes, we'll do the clips from the podcast and the
yeah,
script and use those as YouTube shorts, and then use the short to promote the longer
yep,
podcast.
yeah.
So it's just a good tool in terms of being able to, you know, meet people where they are. It's like, well, if all of
Hmm.
your listeners slash viewers are on YouTube, then obviously you need to be there.
What are you doing now in terms of B-roll? Because obviously that's something, if you've had access and you've been a videographer for a while, you have access to B-roll libraries and stuff like that. But I see some of these tools like Descript and
Yeah.
some of these AI tools are providing like easier ways to create at least B-roll. So it's one step beyond the thumbnail.
Mhm.
And to your point, it is a valid channel because when I first got to YouTube, I just dumped all my stuff, my past episodes there with a
Mhm.
thumbnail. And two or three of the episodes got thousands of downloads,
Wow.
and listens.
Yeah.
And it was just the thumbnail with the waveform,
Mhm.
but that doesn't fly as much now because of people's attention. So,
Yep.
what are some like things that you've done now with B-roll related that are
Mhm.
helpful for, especially for like solo casters that are still doing it
Yeah.
all themselves?
Yeah. I have a consultant client who does an audio only podcast,
Okay.
and I've been taking either entire episodes or just clips from that episode. And then I bring them into a different tool called Pictory.
Oh, I've
Uh,
heard of that. Yeah, yeah,
and the nice thing about Pictory is if you put in the audio, it'll select clips and B-roll for you.
yeah, yeah.
I find I still have to go back in and, say, no, I don't want this clip. I want that clip. Like she was talking
Sure.
about, she's a female owned business. She supports female owned businesses. And I think there's a bias in the stock footage that's like all these sort of mansplaining
Oh,
things. And I'd have to go in and say, no, I want a woman here. No, I want to. So
okay.
you still have to, it's not a cut and paste
Yeah,
situation, but it's a hell of a head start in terms of saying, like, oh, look at that. I put in my audio. All the imagery is there as well. The
sure.
images, supposedly match the audio. So, and if not, you can tweak it a little bit. But at least now you've got a full visual with, transitions and
Hmm.
almost a little bit more of a video storytelling than just an audio with a waveform.
How do you feel about having captions on full videos? I see some people testing that out as well.
Yeah, I do it if the client is posting on LinkedIn.
Oh,
I,
yeah.
I find that, and again, I don't believe half of these stats, like, they say that 80% of people on LinkedIn watch with the sound off. I don't know if that's true, but
Well, yeah, yeah. Well, I
even if,
think a lot of people, so I mean, using myself as an example, but on social media, I make sure everything is off by default because you never know when you're in a public space or
Mhm.
like if I watch some stuff, sometimes I'll be like scrolling through stuff at night and my partner's like about to fall asleep and like something will blast loud on an Instagram feed. So I
Yeah.
just by default now, I think, yeah, to your point, anything that's clips, we definitely do captions on
Yeah,
that.
so I do captions again, just it's like, well, again, I'm trying to, make it as easy for folks to consume the content as possible. And if they are
Yeah,
watching somewhere where, they don't want to disturb anyone, and even if the captions only account for 20% of the folks who are watching it that way, it's
yeah,
still worth adding them.
yeah.
And again, the software like Descript or Pictory makes that, a one-click fix.
So if you've got an hour long interview that's audio only nowadays, how long was that taking you additional production time wise on Pictory?
Takes a little bit more time than Descript because again, I'm going in and trying to find the footage. But the nice
Yeah.
thing about those platforms like Pictory or Descript is everything's there. I don't have to jump out to deposit photos. I don't have to go
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
So I can use those libraries and I'm using, sort of the premium versions of those. But again, I have access to the music and the libraries and all the different bells
Yeah.
and whistles without having to go search for that or without having to go, back in the day, that would cost just one
Yeah.
piece of video footage would cost $60 or something.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting what's happening. And I wonder if, I guess companies like Pictory are making arrangements or partnering with like the
Mhm.
deposit photos and the
Pixabay.
pixels. Yeah. And whoever is to just pull it in because it just makes, that's where people are going for this content,
Yeah.
and the more robust their library is, the more people are going to stick there. So it behooves Pictory to build these relationships with people with all these
Yeah.
stock video libraries.
Right. And then the only other thing is that I do a lot with AI, like Pictory and Descript, obviously, but
Yeah.
use nowadays because it's so easy and so common, you can't just settle for the first clip they give you because that's the
Of
one
course.
everybody's using.
Yeah.
So
That's
it's
true.
like the AI voices, like in Notebook LM, they only have the two
Yeah.
AI voices. They're really good, but
Yeah.
you don't have a lot of variety there.
Yeah. We've been using Wondercraft
Oh, wow.
for another show. So I have that vertical farming podcast that I do, that second show that I do. But we've also, my partner in that business, he publishes a weekly email newsletter called the AgTech Digest. And
Hmm.
so what I did is I took his feed, I mean, I took his summary of the AgTech Digest, just news, what happens, all the companies
Hmm.
that he mentioned. And then I started playing with the Wondercraft tool and I just dropped that in as a source material. And now I've written an SOP. I've trained my team how to do that. So they produce an episode every week.
Oh, cool.
And it's basically, it's almost like it's a female voice
Hmm.
that does the recap of the news, but it's not just reading it. She
Yeah.
interprets it and it's almost like she's like giving her perspective on the news,
Oh,
but
wow.
just using the content that's in the written format.
Yeah.
And it takes them about, probably 30 minutes to put it together. And it's like a 15-minute update. But now we can enhance what we do on the newsletter side. We're saying, hey, do you want to listen to this?
Hmm.
And so now without having to find a host, now you can just have another podcast that's being created.
Yeah.
And I interviewed Oscar, the CEO of Wondercraft, on this show because I'm always looking for opportunities like, hey, you're
Hmm.
doing something podcast related, come on the show. He was a great
Yeah.
interview as well. So he told the story of how he met the founders, built that out. So I don't know if you've played
Mhm.
with that tool as well.
Yeah. And like everything, the AI voices are getting a lot more, uh,
Yeah, much
really
better.
just a lot more human, really. So,
Yeah. And are you using the feature in Descript that allows you to kind of clone your voice? Like people get very nervous about that as
yeah.
well.
I
How
used
that's
it
going to be used
today,
for.
just a few minutes ago before I came on here. I recorded a video and I realized I recorded the wrong date. So I have my voice into script. I just crossed out the
Yeah.
old date, typed in the new date, and had
Yeah.
my AI voice do it. And
Yeah.
it's pretty seamless. It's like anything. I mean, having come from broadcast,
Yeah.
jump cuts were a cardinal sin, and that just took me a
Mm-hmm.
while to
Yeah.
kind of get over it. The way it is these days. So.
I think people are more used to that. You see a lot of jump cuts in the clips right now because they just want to shorten them as much as possible and get the
Mhm.
most important words out. Are tools like Pictoria, I think I tried it a couple of months ago. Do you see that they're making improvements and getting better and improving the AI and improving like
Yeah.
the UI as well?
Absolutely, and again, where they don't, they Pictory, in that case, they use 11 Labs voices, so if
Okay,
they
so
don't
yeah,
have
so
Mhm.
Wondercraft uses 11 Labs as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So, again, without having to reinvent the wheel, they just say, "Hey, we'll just do a deal with 11 Labs and have
Yeah.
access to all their voices." But now I'm seeing, things where much younger voices or really
Mm-hmm.
specific accents, like,
Yeah.
okay, is this speaker from India or Pakistan? Because it may sound the
Oh,
same to an
wow.
American, but you
Wow.
know, so
That's
these kind of
specific.
nuances that started to finally come in and really get specific.
Are you seeing better B-roll as well?
Yes and no, because now I can create my own B-roll.
Oh, okay.
So I think I was using, I can't remember, I think it's luna.com. There's so many apps that it's a little
Yeah.
overwhelming. But I'd say, I want a video of Lou Bortone riding a scooter in Rome. And I get it, and it's great. But it's like, wait a
Is
minute.
that in Pictoria or in Luma?
No, that's Luma. Yeah.
Okay. Is
So
it luma.com?
yeah, I believe so.
Okay.
So again, I can create my own B-roll, and again, it may take a few tries. Like the first try, it's like, that's an 80-year-old guy. Maybe it's me in 20, 30 years. So I go back and say,
Yeah.
make him younger. But it's just, I mean, the stuff you can do now is just mind blowing.
How long do those clips yeah, Luma Labs,
Yeah, sorry
lumalabs.ai?
about that. I
Yeah.
couldn't.
Yeah. And so how long do these B-roll clips, like if you say Lou Bortone on a
Mhm.
scooter in Rome, does it give you like 3 seconds or 30 seconds or?
Yeah, the initial ones are like 5 seconds, and now you
Okay.
can get longer. But again, I'm often testing free versions of the software. It's like, okay, if I
Yeah.
want a 20-second version, I'm gonna have to pay $30 a month or something.
Yep.
But even things like suno.com, which is music by prompt. So I'll say, when I was going to Podfest, I'd say, do a rap song about Podfest and make sure
Mm-hmm.
you mention these three speakers. So
Yeah.
that's the only prompt I gave it. And it spits out this amazing little rap, all audio, which I played at the thing. And people are like, oh my God, how did it know my
Yeah.
name? And
Yeah.
uh, so that kind of stuff is fun because I'll use that type of stuff as say, okay, I want a jingle or an intro for my podcast. I'm just going to go to suno.com and make my own
Oh
original
yeah.
music.
It does music with vocals and also it'll do instrumental stuff as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Instrumentals, vocals, any kind of, genre. Um,
Yeah.
you can either put in your own lyrics, which once in a while I'll do, or you can
Mm.
uh, let them go for it. So,
Yeah. That'll be fun one to play around with. It's funny you mentioned the podcast movement, and years ago, Jared asked me if I wanted to rap the announcements, and so he got me on stage, and I took old school like hip hop songs like "Rapper's Delight,"
Yeah, yeah.
and I basically reworded the words to kind of like so they would play the instrumental, and I was
Mhm.
like rapping about like the events that were going to be happening like the next 3 days at the
Yeah.
conference or something like that. So
Mhm.
I had to actually rewrite the words myself, but it was interesting like that to take like familiar songs and rework them, which is going to
Yeah.
be so much easier to do now.
Oh, I know. I used to do like little song parodies, and I'd take, like a Dean Martin song called like "That's Amore," and I'd go to a karaoke thing, and then just do that, then extract the vocals and put our new
Yeah.
vocals in with the new lyrics, and
Okay.
now it's just nuts. So,
So from a workflow perspective, you go to something like Illuma Labs, you'll take the Illuma Labs, you'll kind of find a good couple of clips, couple of B-roll clips that you like, and
mhm.
then you'll import them into the script then?
Yeah, bring them right into the
Okay.
script. Assuming
Or
I
would
can,
you import them into Pictory?
it depends on, which Pictory kind of, I feel like it has more control over each scene because you're looking at slides instead of
Yeah.
text.
Yeah.
So Pictory gives you a little bit more control, but if it's just something where I say, oh, I just need 5 seconds to cover up something here, then I'll
Okay.
get into the script and add it as the scene.
Okay. So then that's like your workflow. And then as you start to think about what to post on YouTube, there's so
Mhm.
many like people that have varying opinions about like some people say don't worry about the title, some people say the title is the most important thing, some people say the
Mhm.
keywords don't matter, some people say if the field is there then it's there for a reason, so they should
Mhm.
probably populate it.
Yeah.
So with all the things that keep changing about YouTube and the algorithm and how it's like the number two search engine, like how do you think about what else you do once you've posted content on the
Mhm.
site for a client?
Yeah. I mean, I try to make sure that we've sort of covered all the bases. Like,
Yeah.
okay, we've got a square version with captions for LinkedIn. We've got a YouTube short or maybe 3 YouTube shorts
Yep.
that when you upload a YouTube short, you can have it point back to a longer
Yep.
episode. So those
Yep.
point to the regular episodes. So I want to make sure that they're there because if they're not there, they can't be found, obviously. But I don't know. I mean, it's YouTube seems like it changes. Like every time you think you've got it figured out, everything changes. So it's a moving target. But I
Yeah.
think the best practices, just in terms of marketing, it's like, meet your folks where they are.
Yeah.
Make sure that, I always tell folks, if you can do a video version or an interview or you on camera, I think, your face on camera is your most powerful marketing asset,
Yeah.
uh, as well as your voice. But, the more you can give them you, especially in this world of avatars and bots, the better off you're going to be.
Yeah, so much is changing. I try to watch some of the clips of like these YouTube people who teach people how to do YouTube,
Mhm.
like, and though there's like a 10-step things. And so some of the things that I thought were interesting is one person was suggesting like you actually, even the name of the video, when you
Mhm.
upload it, you'll see the name of the video sits in YouTube and people
Yep.
are like, well, that's a field. And that's like,
Shit.
that
Sorry.
could be something. You okay there?
Drop my
Hopefully that you
wallet.
didn't spill anything. Yeah.
Another the joys of live. Yeah, and I mean that's the thing. It's like YouTube tells you what's going to work.
Yeah.
Folks are like trying to figure out, game the algorithm. It's like just go to YouTube. They'll tell you
Yeah.
the title is really important. It should be 69 characters.
Yeah.
Your description is blah blah blah. Your
Yeah.
keywords, and they even say on there because people are like hammering me. Oh, it's SEO this, SEO that. Those actual keywords, they say they don't matter unless you have a name that's hard to spell. Like,
Sure.
okay, give it your last name 3 different ways.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of
So,
sense too.
yeah,
Yeah, and then the other thing that I've heard is something we're testing out is that you upload the video and you leave it as unlisted for like 24 hours. And
mhm,
apparently the algorithm is like in the background, like analyzing the video, and then
interesting.
you wait 24 hours and then you publish the video. So if the editing is done by Tuesday, you let it sit for
Yeah,
Wednesday as unlisted, and then on the Wednesday evening you then schedule it so it publishes on Thursday. So
yeah,
it's hard to see if then that's moved the needle, but with all these things, they're just little incremental things you can
yeah.
do, but you sort of have to do them all
Right, and,
to get the
YouTube
visibility.
will tell you that the first 48 hours is kind of make or break in terms of if
Yeah,
it's gonna go anywhere.
yeah,
So we just try to make sure that we're coordinated in terms of our promos and everything's
hmm,
being promoted consistently at the same time. And when an
yeah,
episode's released, we have, a checklist or a workflow that we do this on LinkedIn and this on Facebook and this
hmm,
on YouTube.
yeah,
And create vertical versions so that there's just as much flexibility because now it's so easy to do that.
yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And so when you're doing videos or people that are starting with video, I know some on the YouTube side, if
Mhm.
a lot of these creators are coming in that are starting on YouTube, right? They think they don't even know about like the podcast world or like RSS feeds. They're just like, I have a YouTube show and it's a podcast. And so
Mhm.
it's, other people are having that argument about whether that's true or not, but that's not.
Right.
But
Right.
what they're doing, they understand the video format really well. And a
Mhm.
lot of them are starting off with clips. Like they'll edit another like 3 minute clip of like something juicy
Yeah.
from the podcast interview. Are you doing that as well to kick off videos as well to keep
Yeah. I
people
mean, we try
engaged?
to, typically, and I don't know, again, you'd probably know a lot more about the best practices, but I just try to do a short clip or
Yeah.
a tease at the
Yeah.
beginning. Then if they
Yeah.
have an intro, then do that and then get it right into the interview.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of folks too are, I know I am watching things on 1.5 speed, just like,
Yeah,
I
for sure.
forget. At this
At the
point, I
very
just
least.
watch the replay or put the podcast on 1.5 speed. But the thing I love about pure audio podcasting is it comes back to way back when I was in radio. It's like,
Y-
okay, it's theater to mind, but it's also totally mobile. So you can go
Yeah.
anywhere and
Yeah.
be listening to a podcast on the beach or in line at the store or whatever it may
Yeah.
be. So, which you still
Yeah. And
can't
it's,
do YouTube unless you're a very reckless driver.
I think I saw that YouTube, because I follow Pod News, I think they're releasing a YouTube Lite subscription because it's
Hmm.
very cost prohibitive. I think it's
Yeah.
$18 a month for YouTube Premium. YouTube Premium, I think, is the only one that you can have like you can minimize the video and it'll still play the
Right.
audio, but you have to be
Mhm.
signed up. So I think they're again, all these different companies, Spotify,
Yeah.
Apple, YouTube, they're all converging on the podcast space. So I
Yeah.
think they're going to have a light version that's a very cheaper subscription.
Hmm.
It's like a YouTube Premium Lite
Yep.
that'll probably allow you to like minimize the video but still hear it if you're on the
That's
go.
cool.
And
Yeah.
Spotify does this as well, right? They'll if
Hmm.
you upload the video to Spotify and you play
Yep.
it, the YouTube from the video, I'm sorry, the audio from the video becomes the audio version,
Yeah.
and you can toggle back and forth. And so, are you having clients ask you to upload the video to YouTube to Spotify as well now?
Yeah, absolutely. So because now, they're able to do the video piece, as you mentioned.
Yeah, yeah. And you
The
already
other
have the content, just might as well get it
Yeah.
shared on as many platforms as possible.
Yep. The other thing that's interesting is, I'm a old geezer, but like I know my kids who are like 25-year-old twins, to
Yeah,
them, a screen is a screen is a screen. Like they watch
yeah,
YouTube on TV and they
yeah,
watch TV, or they watch shows on YouTube on their
yeah,
phone, sometimes at the same time, which like that just makes my ADHD mind break.
yeah,
But they're not really, I mean, that generation who was raised on iPhones, they're not
yeah.
making any distinction between
That's
screens. It's all
true.
just where's my entertainment and where can I get it the quickest?
And I think that's something important for creators to realize. Like we have these preconceived notions of how people should be consuming the content, but to your point, exactly, like
Mhm.
new generations of people are like wherever the content is available and easier for them to consume, and sometimes they'll stream it to their TV or they're on their Roku or their Apple
Yeah.
TV, and they'll just have the Netflix button there or the YouTube button there. And I think
Mhm.
it's also something to be aware of. Probably in terms of, I don't know if podcasters ever thought their podcast episodes would be seen on a big screen, like a
Right. I have.
52-inch,
Yeah.
flat screen, but that's what's happening nowadays. And I think I'm always conscious of that as well, because you never know how people are consuming the content. So you just make it available on as many platforms as
Yeah.
possible.
And assume they're distracted. So
Yeah. Yeah, that's true too. So a couple questions as we wrap up that I ask most guests. The first one is, what is something you've changed your mind about recently?
something I've changed my mind about.
And
Wow.
it could be anything across, it doesn't have to just be around video, or it could be life choices as well.
Yeah. Honestly, it's just been, I can work from anywhere. So why the hell am I where? Why the hell am I here
That's a good one.
in this
Yeah.
country? I try to spend a lot of time in Italy. Other than the time difference, it's like I can easily work from here.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so
You
I
should
think,
look into you should look into those towns. Some of them have age restrictions, but
yeah,
I see all these times these towns, these tiny, tiny towns that probably were manufacturing towns, or they're an older generation has moved out and they're
mhm.
enticing people to move there.
Yeah,
Like,
1 euro houses. I saw
yeah,
an actual. Now I'm flooded with them because as soon as you look at something on Facebook, that's all you see.
yeah.
There's an entire village for sale in Tuscany for $1 million. It's abandoned. It's all, but a
Oh
village,
my
an
God.
actual town. Let's buy this town for $1 million and go over it. So I've
That would
changed
be a fun
about,
project. You could do a whole video series about that,
yeah,
restarting, yeah, in
yeah.
Italy.
So
Yeah.
just the way I work, I've recently changed my mind about that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think the challenge, and I work remotely as well. I'm in Minnesota, so it's nice because like I said, we've got chickens, we've got our own well, we're
Hmm.
planting food, and
Right.
it's these things you become aware of. I'm Northeaster, like, you, I grew up in New York, you want food, you go to the grocery store.
Right.
But, I was there for Hurricane Sandy, and like, once you lose the opportunity to have food, you start to realize like,
Hmm.
where's my food coming from? And,
Right.
like my partner's father's a hunter and he hunts venison and
Wow.
he's hunted turkey in the past and
Yeah.
grouse. And so it's an interesting wake up call, and then I think with all the stuff that's happening in the world, COVID, you're like, maybe there's some skills that are important to learn.
Yeah. It's good. It's good to have chickens now because
Yeah.
with the price of eggs.
We didn't even plan it that way, but it's like this was the first time that I went to the grocery store. It was like 3 weeks ago where I didn't buy eggs.
Hmm.
And we've had the chickens. Today's their actually 1 year anniversary. So it's
Oh, wow.
that we've had them. We've got five
Yeah.
chickens and they're all laying now. So we're getting 5 eggs,
Nice.
anywhere from 3 to 5 eggs a day. So, and I eat like the eggs every day. So,
Hmm.
but it's again, things you think about. But to your point about like working remotely, I think it's a different set of challenges because you have to like work harder to expand your network
Hmm.
and build those relationships. And even as older, I joined a men's circle last year, and for men, it's a big problem to like make new friends and just like
Hmm.
make connections. And I think a lot of people don't talk about that as well. And it's like
Yeah.
you have to work
Absolutely.
harder to like be
Hmm.
social. For women, it comes a little easier, and they've got their social groups. But for guys, it's like that have this like opportunity to work remotely. That's the good side, and then you gotta put more effort into the other side because when I worked in an office, that was my social group. Like
Yeah.
we'd go out after work and we'd have the social groups. That's really thinking about how much life has changed.
Yeah, I know. And we both are in cold climates. So in
Yeah.
winter, it's like I may not leave the house for 3 or 4 days at a time.
Yeah, it gets pretty brutal. So yeah, we recently went to Florida for a little bit, went to Austin last year. So I think we're just building that in. Like every winter, we're gonna go
Hmm.
away. We found
Yeah.
someone who's gonna watch the chickens, so that's the big concern.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what is the most misunderstood thing about you?
I'm very much an introvert.
Yeah.
And I think, pretty low key. And I think when people meet me in person, they're like, oh, you seem so quiet, because there's on stage Lou, and then there's like everyday.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think I'm always afraid that my shyness is going to be mistaken for arrogance. So
Mm.
and if I'm standoffish, it's just because like that's just,
Yeah.
my combination of introvert and ADHD. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think I definitely like through the help of some therapy, I've realized I'm a bit neurodivergent myself and
mhm.
not ever like officially diagnosed, but there's aspects of it. I'm like, oh yeah, that rings true and
Yeah,
stuff.
totally makes sense.
And on the sort of the introversion side, it's like I've described myself as selectively extroverted or
Hmm.
situationally extroverted. Like
Yeah.
I'll go to podcast movement, I'll
Yeah.
be on stage, and I've even gone to karaoke with some of the crew after late
Yeah.
night. But then, 2 or 3 days of that, and you just have to like retreat back into your
Yeah.
cocoon.
After Podfest, like I literally didn't leave the hotel for 3 days. And
Yeah,
with all the people, 2,000 or so people there and
yeah,
socializing, and speaking and dinners. And,
yeah,
I'd come up and curl up in a ball and, and
yeah.
I need that recovery time.
Do you usually like plan an extra couple of days in the hotel after the conference just to kind of wind down?
It depends on the location. I
Yeah,
try
that's
to,
true. Yeah,
but in the case of Podfest in January, it would have been nice to spend a little bit longer, but I had to
yeah.
get back because I have two pugs that are a bit antsy if I'm not around.
Oh,
So
that's fun. What are their names?
Regina and Rocco.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've had everything from dogs jumping into people's laps during these conversations, and
Yeah.
it's a reminder that's like nothing perfect. Like back in the day, you'd have to be on
Mhm.
TV, everything's polished.
Yep.
Nowadays, you've got the delivery guy coming, the dryer running, and the dogs jumping in.
Yeah, that's why studio sound is a lifesaver because
Yes.
it never fails. As soon as I start a podcast, the dogs go nuts. So
It's pretty wild how great studio sound is. I'm on interviews now where the sound is not that good, but I'm not worried that much anymore.
mhm,
And I used to be really like OCD about saying, "Hey, can you fix your sound? Can you like
mhm,
unplug your headset or something?" I had someone with a Bluetooth mic and it was not the best, or they were in an echoey room, and I would just be worried about like, man, how's this going to sound? And
yeah,
now it's funny how what it does to me as a host. I'm just more relaxed because I
mhm,
know what studio sound can and can't do, and most of the time it's an improvement over
yeah,
what's there, and it puts me more at ease and allows me to be more present with my guests, which is
mm,
a plus.
yeah. Because that's the thing. It's like every time I tell folks when they're dealing with video and tech, every time you add something, another camera, another light, another
Yeah,
piece of software, it gets exponentially more complicated. So
yeah,
now that you can just sort of let your guard down and say, as we used to say in TV days, we'll fix it in post.
yeah,
So
yeah, exactly. Well, Lou, thanks for connecting. It's been fun to kind of running the same circles for a while, especially at
Yeah.
podcast conferences and through our mutual circles. And it's nice to get a deeper dive and learn a little bit more about you. And thanks for coming on and sharing your story and then what your journey has been like. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Harry. I wish I had your radio voice, by the way, too. You're perfect for podcasting and radio.
Well, you can make a couple adjustments and with studio sound
Yeah,
nowadays and
really.
maybe make those fixes in post, like they say. So,
Yeah.
where's the best place for folks to connect with you and learn more about what you're working on?
At loubortone.com. And
Okay.
everything's there, podcasts, video stuff, all the goodies.
Yeah. Sounds good. We'll make sure all those links are in the show notes as well. Thanks for your time, Lou. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.